Hey everyone, it's Charlie Morgan here, and in today's video we're going to talk about how to use systems to achieve predictable, consistent outcomes in your life. The whole point of a system, really, at least in your personal life or sometimes also in your business life, is to remove the need for you to think. And so the way that we become more successful is by being able to allocate more mental capacity to problems, okay? So becoming successful or building a business is all about solving problems. And the speed and effectiveness to solution, the speed and effectiveness of how good you are at solving problems depends entirely upon how much of your brain you can allocate and dedicate to these problems. And so what you want to do is you want to find ways to routinely, predictably, consistently solve the same problems over and over again. So pretty much every single system, with perhaps a couple of exceptions, but they're very rare, on the planet look like this, okay? So we have a couple of boxes, a triangle, an arrow, another box here, and a sun like this. So this looks a little bit weird, but I'll give it some labels. We have inputs, process, outputs, and then here we have feedback, and then here environment. So basically, the way that any system functions is we always start really with the inputs. Now, sometimes you can start with the outputs because if you're looking to build a system, the reason you're building that system is because you know what you want or you know what you want to achieve. And so often what you need to do is you need to look at the output of the thing, like i.e. I want to make a brownie or I want to get to work. You know what your goal is, you know what your objective is. And from that, you reverse engineer what you need to put in and how you need to process that to get that. But for the sake of thinking this thing through in linear flow, which is going to make a lot more sense to you right now, we'll start with the inputs. But let's say that you're a student, and let's say you've got an exam coming up, and you want to get an A star on the exam, right? Well, what you can do is you can build a system to do that. And what would that look like? You'd have a system for studying, right? And so the input of the studying system will be all the information that you've learned that you need to memorize or, critically understand to then give answers to the questions in the exam that ultimately give you the grade. And so if you're a student and you want to get an A star or the best grade, then the output is the grade. The process is the examination and the input is the information. What we have down here is we have feedback, and feedback is crucial because what feedback basically is once you receive an output as a result of processing the inputs, you kind of get to look at this thing and decide if it's close to what you actually wanted to achieve or not, okay? And if, let's just like the brownie, for example, right? So let's say that you are cooking a brownie, big, massive brownie. We're not gonna go down the hash brownie route. It's not funny at all, actually, to be honest. And you're like, okay, I've made this brownie and it's too salty or it's too sweet or it's overcooked or it's undercooked. It doesn't taste like this, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't taste palatable. Then what you would do is you use that feedback to adjust the inputs and also the processes. So this feedback loop here often will determine what inputs you use next time. And it will also often determine what processes that you use as well. And then a crucial thing to understand about all systems is they all operate in an environment. And the environment is simply the circumstances surrounding the system itself. And so if this is a system for studying, then the environment in which you're operating is going to be the room that you're in. It could be your bedroom, it could be your university library. It's also going to be to do with the people around you. It's going to be to do with what you've eaten and how hydrated you are because your body's part of that environment. And so often the function of a system can be heavily, heavily, heavily dictated by the environment that it's in. Because if you can have the best teachers, right, for study, they can teach you the best things, you can have the best teachers in the world and the best information to remember in the world, you can have the best processes to study that information, and you can have a really strong way to try and remember it. But if you're doing this in a really chaotic, let's say you're trying to study in the gulag, well, you're probably not going to remember much because you're going to be starving and forced to do manual labor. So you get my point? The environment is just as important as everything else when it comes to this, which is why as entrepreneurs, or as an entrepreneur myself, I take such good care of my environments and endeavor to create the best environment that's conducive to the function of the processes, to the inputs to produce the outputs that I want. And so that's basically how a system works, and that's how to think in systems. And so there's lots of different ways that you can apply this into your life and into your business. And so if you're trying to build a system in your business, let's say, for example, for cold outreach, let's say you want to build a cold email system or a cold calling system or a cold DM system or a content system, the only way to achieve true consistency is to have consistent input. yeah, this is basically how you create tons of cognitive capacity to solve very difficult problems. And again, at the start of the video, like I said, the speed at which you solve these problems and the speed at which you can overcome these issues in your life is the speed at which you can create systems to deal with other things that require your capacity. So I have these to basically ensure that, like, you know, that thing that people used to talk about that was never really neurologically or scientifically accurate, where people were like, oh, you only use like 10% of your brain. And then you have that film Limitless, where the guy takes like the pill and he's like suddenly using like 100% of his brain and he's really smart. It's not quite like that, but the point is that, like, this is your brain. And, you know, right now, like, this is kind of like mental capacity 101. So right now, let's say that you're doing loads of shit and, you know, you don't really have any systems for anything. Like, what you might find is, and then you try and start a business, right? So this is kind of how it works. So let's say that this is free and this is busy. So in your brain right now, if you're trying to start a company, then maybe what's happened is you have 20% of your brain free, i.e. like 20% of your memory, like, you know how we use like RAM in a computer, can be allocated to the company. But 80% of your brain is spent on you making the same decisions every day. So like, what am I gonna wear today? Or what am I gonna eat today? Or I need to book this date thing, where am I gonna do this? Or I need to deal with this person, how am I gonna do this? Or when should I get my hair cut? Like, these are all trivial decisions that can be outsourced or otherwise really just honestly systemized, like I've just explained there. Like, oh, what YouTube video am I gonna make this week? Or what am I gonna do this week? Or like, what am I gonna do tomorrow? Or like, what golf course am I gonna go to? Or all these decisions, like, they come at a cost. And so what we're looking to do by creating systems and by building routines into our lives with inputs, process, and outputs is, you know, just start freeing up more and more of this space. And the more systems you create, the more capacity that you have that's free, the better you're going to be at solving problems and actually being able to work through complicated issues that move you on a trajectory towards your goal. Talking of systems, by the way, if you're a marketing agency owner or a coach or consultant and you need a system to get more clients, you can click a link in the description because we can help you do that. But I don't really care if you do or not. It's just a shameless plug. All right, bye.